Kate and Mouse. How these mouse stories came to be. Many years ago, when I was a young man, I met a little girl we'll call Kate on a Caribbean island. Kate was traveling with her parents, who were very prominent people from England, so prominent that everyone knew Kate, who had her picture taken sitting on the knee of the British Prime Minister, which is why I'm not telling you Kate's real name. But Kate's parents were what I considered elderly in those days, and since Kate, who was then 5, was their only child, they took her with them wherever they went, and that was all over the world. They told me they were coming to my hometown of New York City, and knowing they weren't really up to showing Kate around my city like I could, I offered to take her out to see the sights when they came to New York. I was surprised when they actually took me up on my offer, and equally surprised when I went to pick Kate up to find that her nanny, with whom they traveled, was coming along too. Actually, I was relieved, since I'd never taken a 5-year-old on a tour of New York City and wasn't really sure how I was going to handle it. But along came Nanny, and we had a wonderful day. Kate was staying in the penthouse suite of the Grand Hotel, so going to the zoo in Central Park, to a great hot chocolate restaurant on 59th Street for lunch, to a famous toy store on Fifth Avenue just a few blocks away to look at and actually play with the toys, to Rockefeller Center to see the skaters on the skating rink, was all within walking distance. When we got back to the hotel, Kate drew me aside, cupped her little hands, and very solemnly introduced me to her imaginary friend, Mouse, who lived at the hotel and whom Kate always saw when she was there. I expect Kate had wonderful imaginary friends all over the world, because if you're 5 years old and have only grown-ups around all the time, you've got to have some friends you can talk to, even if you have to make them up. Kate was calling me Uncle Bill by this time, so of course when Kate said, "Mouse, I'd like you to meet Uncle Bill." "Uncle Bill, I'd like you to meet Mouse." Mouse and I shook hand and paw, and that's how I got to meet Mouse. Kate, with her mother's help, wrote me a beautiful thank you note when she got back to England and asked me to write to her. So every time I'd stop by the Grand Hotel and visit with Mouse, I'd write Kate about what he was up to or what he told me. All of what I've told you is true, and here are some mouse stories which are also true, in their own way. George Washington Mouse. February 17, 1963. Dear Kate, I was passing by the Grand Hotel today, and I decided to stop in and see Mouse, and I almost didn't recognize him when I saw him because he was dressed in the outfit of a Revolutionary soldier, complete with a 3-cornered hat on his little head. "What are you doing all dressed up like that?" I asked. "Oh," he said, giving me a look as if I really didn't understand. "It's George Washington's birthday tomorrow, and I'm celebrating the wonderful legacy of George Washington Mouse." "I never heard of George Washington Mouse," I said. "Who was he?" Mouse looked surprised at my ignorance and asked me, "Haven't you ever had a birthday cake to celebrate a birthday?" "Of course I've had a birthday cake to celebrate a birthday," I said. "Everyone has." At which point Mouse told me the reason everyone has birthday cake to celebrate a birthday is because of George Washington Mouse. And here's how it all happened. George Washington, after leading the Americans in winning the Revolutionary War, retired to his beautiful home called Mount Vernon, where lots of his countrymen would come to pay their respects and to praise him. But George Washington was very modest, and he really didn't like to be praised and celebrated. However, one thing he did like was cake. George Washington really loved cake, and every year on his birthday, the cook at Mount Vernon baked George Washington a big, beautiful cake. Now there was a mouse who lived in the kitchen at Mount Vernon, and when he heard about the problem that people were having in praising George Washington the way they wanted to, he got an idea. He knew the cook baked a cake for George Washington the night before George Washington's birthday. So that night, after the cake was baked, and while it was cooling, and the icing was still wet, this mouse climbed up on top of the cake, and with his little long tail, he wrote in the icing, "Happy birthday, George Washington, we all love you." Well, the next day a lot of people gathered around to celebrate George Washington's birthday with him, and when George Washington went down to the dining room and saw all the people, he was about to go back upstairs to his study because he was so shy about being praised, but then he saw that big, beautiful cake, and he couldn't resist coming among the people in order to get a piece of that cake. And when he saw what was written on top of the cake, and even though it was praising him, he smiled, accepted the praise, and a big piece of cake, as he did every year on his birthday as long as he lived. And ever since then, people in America, and lots of other places, have been celebrating birthdays with cakes with "Happy Birthday" written on top of them. And this was all because of what that mouse, who lived in the kitchen and did the night before George Washington's birthday. And all throughout Mousedom, that mouse became famous and became known as George Washington Mouse. Now, whether or not George Washington Mouse was really an ancestor of my friend Mouse, I really don't know. But as long as it makes Mouse happy to think that he was, and to get dressed up as George Washington to celebrate George Washington's birthday, I'll be happy for him. I'm going to have a piece of birthday cake to celebrate George Washington's birthday and George Washington Mouse, and I hope you will have a piece of birthday cake and celebrate too. Love, Uncle Bill. April 12, 1966. Dear Kate, your old Uncle Bill has been such a terrible fellow and is so full of apologies that if you planted him, you'd grow into an apology tree. Mouse, who wouldn't speak to me for months because I hadn't written to you, says that friendship is like a garden. It will never grow and continue to blossom unless tended to. Well, I've been remiss in tending to our friendship, and I won't let it happen again. Mouse probably wouldn't be talking to me yet if it weren't for the funny thing that happened at the Grand Hotel Sunday morning. It was a bright, happy Easter morning, chilly enough to make the lilies want to wrap themselves in a coat of pussy willows, and I went down to the Grand Hotel to walk in the Easter parade and have a bit of brunch. I wished the doorman happy Easter, and the bell captain, and the elevator man, and the maitre d', all of whom wished me happy Easter back. An exchange of greetings is always nice, and so I was feeling nice, not glum, not jovial, ha-ha, just nice, when all of a sudden, who do I see but our friend Mouse with two enormous, well, at least they were enormous for a mouse, two enormous pink ears propped on his head. The ears were tall and pointed, and he could hardly hold his head up for the weight of them. But there he was, strutting around, wiggling his nose as furiously as ever he could, and trying to nibble a piece of lettuce, which he held between his paws as if he were carrying the royal crown on a velvet cushion. Well, look who's trying to imitate an Easter bunny, I said. Imitate nothing, he said in a huff, dropping the piece of lettuce, which was almost as big as he was, and wiggling his nose all the more furiously. I'll have you know, and here he struck a pose like all those people who make loud speeches with big funny words that don't mean anything. I'll have you know that I am an honorary Easter bunny, entitled therefore inasmuch thereby and to wit, to wear the biggest pink ears and to eat the sweetest lettuce of every lettuce patch from Auckland to Zanzibar. And with that he stomped his foot, pounded his chest, and suffered a weak smile as one of the pink ears fell to the floor, making him a bit lopsided, and a very silly-looking fellow indeed. Well, I couldn't help but laugh out loud, and I guess it wasn't until then that Mouse realized that he'd been talking to me despite his resolution, made around New Year's, that he wouldn't say a word to me because I hadn't written to you. He looked a little downcast as he stooped to pick up the fallen bunny ear, and I was very sorry I'd laughed at him. I really couldn't help myself. He shook the ear at me and said, "I really am an honorary Easter bunny, you know." "I didn't know," I said, "but if you'll forgive me, I promise to write to Kate and tell her all about it." I picked him up, removed his other funny bunny ear so he could hold his head up straight. It kept falling to the side from the weight of the ear, and sat him on my lap. We smiled, shook hands, and paused respectively, and like old times, he told me the story of how he became an honorary Easter bunny. Once upon a time, not very long ago, but sometime before Easter, there was a little boy named Gerald Werreld. Gerald Werreld was very much like every other little boy, except for one thing. While most little boys break things because they are careless or because they're curious and take them apart and don't know how to put them back together, Gerald Werreld broke things just for one reason. He loved to break things. He broke things like boats, trains, trucks, cricket bats, everything. And what was worse, he broke everybody else's things. Pretty soon he became so good at it he could just look at something and it would break. Everybody began calling him Terrible Gerald Werreld. Although he became very lonesome and very sorry he broke things, he just couldn't stop breaking them. Well, the Easter Bunny heard of the plight of Terrible Gerald Werreld and decided that if Terrible Gerald Werreld were given an Easter egg, a beautiful, beautiful Easter egg, and it didn't break, Terrible Gerald Werreld might be cured. But the problem was that Terrible Gerald Werreld, who was known to break toy metal soldiers with just one look, would certainly break an Easter egg even before he had a chance to play with it. Now it happened that the Easter Bunny was staying at the Grand Hotel. Nobody knew it, not even the doorman. Nobody, that is, except Mouse, who knows everything that goes on there. Just before Easter, he was worrying about Terrible Gerald Werreld and eating a carrot rather half-heartedly when Mouse came upon him. "What's the matter?" said Mouse, knowing something was wrong because the Easter Bunny, usually a very joyous fellow, looked so dejected. And the Easter Bunny told Mouse about Terrible Gerald Werreld. "How do you make an Easter egg?" asked Mouse. "Well," said the Easter Bunny, "you make a little hole in an egg, blow out the inside, and then—" "Say no more," said Mouse. "Your problem is solved. All you have to do is take me along when you give the Easter egg to Terrible Gerald Werreld." So Mouse went along on Easter morning when the Easter Bunny left an Easter egg next to Terrible Gerald Werreld's bed. By the time Terrible Gerald got up, Mouse had climbed through the little hole in the Easter egg, and since it was painted 6 glorious colors on the outside, nobody would think to look inside, and nobody knew he was there. Terrible Gerald Werreld soon discovered the Easter egg, and since he didn't like getting up in the morning anyway, he gave it a really withering, egg-breaking look. As soon as it began to crack, Mouse scrambled up to the crack on the inside and held it together. Terrible Gerald Werreld was so surprised that it hadn't broken that he carefully picked up the Easter egg to give it another look. Each time one of Terrible Gerald Werreld's looks began to crack the egg, Mouse scrambled up to the crack and held it together from the inside. Pretty soon, Terrible Gerald Werreld stopped looking for the egg to break it and began looking at it to see how pretty it was and to admire it. Well, that did it. For the first time since he was a very little boy, Terrible Gerald Werreld found out he could play with something and enjoy it without breaking it. When he went down to tell his parents, Mouse climbed out of the egg, of course, and the word is that terrible Gerald Werrold has never broken anything since. He's not terrible anymore, and even his friends let him play with their toys. For this clever feat, Mouse was made an honorary Easter Bunny. Mouse is having a picture painted of himself in full regalia, and he promised me a copy of it. As soon as I get it, I'll send a copy to you. Meanwhile, happy Easter. Love, Uncle Bill. There's Mouse in his full regalia as an honorary Easter Bunny. Mugwump. August 16, 1965. Dear Kate, because I hadn't seen Mouse in a long time, I stopped in to see him the other day, but the hotel management said he was away. Well, that was a disappointment. So I went over to see Ambassador Mouse to find out where Mouse had gone. I call him Ambassador Mouse because the Ambassador is the name of the grand hotel at which he lives and to which Mouse had gone for Thanksgiving dinner last year. Ambassador Mouse said that Mouse had won a 3-week trip to Mugwump in a Mousedom lottery and was staying an extra week on his own. I told Ambassador Mouse that he and I should go visit Mouse there. Mugwump is a most extraordinary place, where pineapples don't have prickly skins, orange peels just peel by breathing on them, and the apples don't have cores. The hens lay only chocolate eggs. You never have to eat food you don't like, and every other tree is a spaghetti tree with a sauce hose and a butter hose next to it for those who want sauce or butter. All the animals there talk and love to be ridden on, and the schools have vacations on all weekdays with every weekend off and no homework. But you can't go there if your fingernails are dirty. Oh, I wanted to go very badly, but Ambassador Mouse took one look at my fingernails and said he could practically build himself a garden in there. Well, they weren't all that bad, so I said I'd clean them before Ambassador Mouse could even close his bags for the trip to Mugwump. He was adamant. They're very strict in Mugwump, he said. Once you've had dirty fingernails, you'll never make it past the Grand Mig. Huh? The Grand what? I said. The Grand Mig of Mugwump, said Mouse. He's the king, president, chief fingernail checker, all rolled into one, and he would never approve. Well, I scrubbed and I scrubbed until my fingers were as pink as a bunny's nose, but Ambassador Mouse said it wouldn't do me any good, that I'd have to have my fingernails cleaned for a whole month, or the Mugwumpians would be very upset. So I had to let Ambassador Mouse go by himself. On my way home yesterday, I stopped by to see if Ambassador Mouse was back, and he was. He told me that Mouse was having a fine time in Mugwump, but that he'd grown very fat from eating too many oranges. You see, it's a crime in Mugwump to peel an orange without eating it. The Mugwumpians know better than to go breathing on the oranges, but poor Mouse was so fascinated by the oranges that he breathed on them all the time when he first got there, and of course he had to eat them when he did because the peels came off. He's learned not to breathe on them now, and he's enjoying his diet of chocolate eggs and spaghetti. Maybe it's just as well I couldn't go. I probably would have gotten a tummy ache. I'll try to visit Mouse again when I'm in the vicinity. I want him to tell me the story of what happened in the barnyard when our friend Kate wouldn't eat her eggs when she was a little girl. Mouse told me that story a long time ago, but I forgot most of it, and I told Mouse that I needed to be reminded about that story. Meanwhile, I intend to keep my fingernails clean as a snowflake, and if you do the same, maybe Mouse will take us to Mugwump the next time we are in New York together. Love, Uncle Bill. And there's Mouse getting fat in Mugwump. Great Barnyard Strike. August 16, 1966. Dear Kate, I know you're back in Barbados, and I hope you're nice and warm and swimming and happy, because if you weren't, Mouse and I would be very sad. I saw Mouse the other day, and he was telling me how much he missed your visits. But I assured him that you were better off in Barbados in January than you would be if you were in New York. We were reminding ourselves about your lovely visit, and Mouse mentioned the great barnyard strike that you caused during that visit when you were first introduced to us. And I said, I didn't think he'd ever told me about that. Oh, said Mouse, maybe I never told you about it, because the great barnyard strike that Kate caused was such a sorrowful affair. I was quick to defend you and said, no, there's nothing wrong with the strike. Labor must organize and fight for its rights, and if Kate was responsible for such a worthwhile effort, then she's a true daughter of a labor peer. I thought that was a very nice speech and was waiting for Mouse to applaud and cry, hear, hear! But instead he just shook his head and said, my dear Uncle Bill, you're getting to be just like a grown-up. You'll never understand, but I'll try to explain it anyway. At this, Mouse reminded me of the first time we met when you were 5 and you refused to eat the beautiful plate of scrambled eggs that was so elegantly served by your friend the waiter at the penthouse in the Grand Hotel. Mouse said he had it on very good authority from his relatives in England that word had gotten back to the barnyard on the farm next door to Shepherd's Croft, where you live, and from which your mummy gets all her food supplies. And this is the story he'd gotten. Chicken, who considered herself the mother hen of all eggs, and was insulted that you wouldn't eat your eggs, said that she was fit to be fried, and was so upset she stopped laying eggs. As you can imagine, this left Rooster quite ruffled, and he didn't crow for a week. That, in turn, caused the whole barnyard to oversleep, with disastrous results. Horse bridled at the very idea of pulling a plow, and refused to do it. Pig said he wouldn't knuckle under and refused to eat and fatten up, and Cow said she'd kick the bucket before she gave another drop of milk. Meanwhile, out in the field, Corn said it was so amazed that you wouldn't eat Chicken's magnificent eggs that it wouldn't ripen, and Wheat said it would stop growing and crack up if you wouldn't eat Chicken's eggs. Well, my dear Uncle Bill, said Mouse, you can imagine how disastrous it would have been if that situation had continued. There would have been no eggs, no meat, no corn, no milk, no bread, and worst of all, no spaghetti. Ah, now I remember you telling me this, I said, and when you told Kate about the trouble she was causing and told her to put the eggs on top of buttered toast, which she loved, and eat them that way, she followed your advice and ate her eggs the next day, and that stopped the strike. Right, said Mouse, and I gave him such a hearty high five that I almost knocked him over, I'm afraid. So Mouse and I are looking forward to our all going out for spaghetti next time you're in New York. We know of a wonderful place just around the corner from the Grand Hotel. Meanwhile, we hope you continue to have a lovely time sunning and swimming in Barbados. Love, Uncle Bill.